Good morning. Good afternoon. My name is Edward Sanshin Oberholtzer. I'm the resident priest and guiding teacher at the Joseph Priestley Zen Sangha in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. We're part of Empty Moon Zen. If you go to the north side of the Cambridge Commons, just outside Harvard Yard, you'll find the statue of John Bridge, identified on a plaque as John Bridge, the Puritan, though, in all honesty, no one knows what he looked like, and the statue was a gift to the city of Cambridge, foisted on that city by one of his and my distant relatives. Bridge was one of my stern and upright relatives going back to shortly after the first pilgrims settled here in North America. I won't speak to the religious tenets that led him to be identified as a Puritan, but I will say that he brought with him a growing Northern European concept of land as a commodity, to be bought and sold as something differing little from livestock, muskets, cookware, or articles of clothing. Indeed, no different from the treatment of human beings as chattel. When you claim the land, you claim the exclusive right to the use of that land, and by a charter from Charles I, King of England, that land was theirs, whatever the original occupants might have thought. Bridge and his fellows came to the New World and encountered a people whose concepts of land ownership differed radically from their own. The Wampanoags viewed land as commonly held. A tribe could sell hunting and farming rights to another group. But the idea that they could sell exclusive and exclusionary rights to the land was foreign to them. After all, who owns the earth? When the Native Americans sold Manhattan Island to the Dutch for a handful of trinkets, the Dutch believed they were getting the bargain of a century, a freehold on all of that land. The Native Americans thought they were merely granting access to lands held in common, land they believed they would continue to occupy together with those upstart Dutchmen. Skipping ahead several centuries and several hundred miles, I live on a small piece of land, bordered on the one side with a suburban neighborhood, not unlike the one where I grew up, and on the other side by farm fields, fields that have been worked for the past 2 centuries and more by descendants of the English and Pennsylvania Dutch who settled here in the latter part of the 18th century. The land had been claimed by, among others, the sons of the Reverend Joseph Priestley, the man who brought both his Unitarian faith and his love of chemistry to the Pennsylvania wilderness, just down the road in the town of Northumberland. All of this without consideration for the Native American tribes, the Susquehannocks, a small confederation of Iroquoian people who held the land in trust for the good of all, who sold the land to land speculators, that they believing that they were merely selling the ability to hunt, fish, and cultivate that land, not to own it to the exclusion of others, and especially not of themselves. There are to this day some members of the Cherokee Nation living on reservations in Oklahoma who can trace some part of their lineage back to the Susquehannock. Little more is left of my ghostly neighbors. The 4 corners of my land have been duly surveyed and staked out. The deed to my house can be found in the Registry of Deeds in Union County, Pennsylvania. I can trace ownership of this land back several centuries up to its taking from those Susquehannock. This might seem far afield from a talk on the precepts, but hear me out. The words of Bodhidharma on the Second Grave Precept as laid out in our Jukai ceremony run, self-nature is subtle and mysterious. In the realm of the unattainable Dharma, not having thoughts of gaining is called the precept of not stealing. The self and the things of the world are just as they are. The gate of emancipation is open. Being satisfied with what I have, I vow to take up the way of not stealing. When I hear those words, I am reminded of how twisted and complex are the lines of all that we hold dear. I am the recipient of land that ultimately came to me through what? A misunderstanding as to the nature of land tenure? A long history of smallpox-infected blankets, of the French and Indian wars, of forced dislocation to barren tracts of land out west tell us otherwise. No, this was no misunderstanding on my ancestors' part. No, we all are, living a life stolen from others. And not simply the Native Americans this side of the Atlantic. Back in the old world, who ruled, who held the land, who lived, who died, all came down, when you look closely, to raw power imposed on both peoples and on the land. There were more than enough people with thoughts of gaining, and I can't deny those thoughts myself. Gerald Winstanley and his comrades, known as the Diggers, were, at the time of my Pilgrim forefathers, looking at this earth much like the Native Americans, as a common treasury for all. They were treated with the same consideration as the Susquehannock. Property is theft, said Pierre-Joseph Proudhon. And so this precept of not stealing seems impossible. One of 16 impossible precepts, at least for those of us who know of the crime of the receipt of stolen goods. Where does this take us? The self and the things of the world are just as they are. You and I are empty. Things stolen, these too are empty. There is no thief. There is nothing stolen. There is no theft and no victim. And yet, there are those stragglers struggling along the trail of tears. There are those men, women, and children suffering through the middle passage. There are all of their descendants to this day. There are those families put out on the street for the lack of rent. There are those of us who have benefited from that suffering, who, even without thoughts of gaining, have nonetheless gained. Not simply land, but lives can be and have been stolen. Time has been stolen. Potential has been stolen. The future has been stolen. The world has become adept at the theft of intangibles, as noted by that Shakespearean villain, Iago, in the play Othello. Good name and man and woman, dear my lord, is the immediate jewel of their souls. Who steals my purse steals trash, 'tis something, nothing. 'Twas mine, 'tis his, and has been slave to thousands. But he that filches from me my good name robs me of that which not enriches him, and makes me poor indeed. Something to think of when our government denies recognition of tribal status to descendants of those displaced by our Pilgrim forefathers. And here we see an intertwining of the precepts. Elevating oneself at the expense of others does not much differ from stealing one's good name or one's tribe. Taking land by deception entangles the precept enjoining speaking falsely with that second precept enjoining and forbidding theft. A campaign of genocide meant to rid the land of its former occupants brings up the precept against killing as well as the precept against stealing. All my ancient twisted karma. So here's the invitation. No, we can't live up to the precepts. They are in the realm of the unattainable Dharma. We can't live except on the fruits of, if not our own, then our history's larceny. But we can be aware. We can use these impossible precepts to notice, to avow, to atone, to be at one with all that we do, all that we have done, all that we will do. Opening our eyes to the fruits of our action is hard. What we see we cannot unsee. The precepts call us to a hard and difficult path, a path ancient and twisted, strewn with stumbling blocks, but a path that you and I will all walk together. Thank you.